So, on June 21st, 2025, after years of tension just simmering below the surface between the United States and Iran, it all erupted. A sudden, dramatic military action. This is the story of how we got to that point.
I mean, imagine waking up to this. The President of the United States just comes out and says it, point blank. It was this incredibly definitive, powerful statement that basically told the entire world, okay, everything has changed. A brand new and much more dangerous phase in the Middle East had just begun.
Right? So the big question is, how on earth did it come to this? Airstrikes like these don't just happen in a vacuum. They're always the end result of a long story. In this case, a story of diplomatic breakdowns, shifting strategies, and just immense pressure building up. To really get it, we have to go back and trace that long fuse that was lit years ago.
So here are the hard facts of the operation. It was codenamed Midnight Hammer. And picture this. Elite B-2 stealth bombers took off from Missouri, flew a marathon 37-hour round trip to target the crown jewels of Iran's nuclear program. We're talking about Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. These deeply buried facilities that have been the focus of international anxiety for decades.
To really find the roots of this conflict, we have to rewind. We have to go back to that landmark agreement that, ironically, was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of thing from ever happening.
The JCPOA. You've definitely heard that acronym thrown around. It stands for the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Back in 2015, this was hailed as a massive diplomatic achievement. The idea was actually pretty simple. Iran agrees to verifiable, strict limits on its nuclear work, and in exchange, the world lifts these crushing economic sanctions, hopefully bringing Iran back into the global community.
But the deal's life was, well, short and incredibly turbulent. It gets signed in 2015. Just 3 years later, in 2018, the United States walks away, unilaterally. By 2024, you had Iran's own top diplomat saying it was beyond revival. The path to cooperation was effectively slammed shut.
So what went so wrong? Well, it depends on who you ask. Supporters of the deal saw a clear, verifiable way to block Iran's path to a bomb. But the Trump administration saw what it called fatal flaws. They argued it didn't address Iran's ballistic missile program, that key restrictions would expire over time because of sunset provisions, and maybe their biggest complaint was that sanctions relief just freed up cash for Iran to fund its proxy groups across the region.
So with the deal dead and U.S. sanctions piling back on, something started to change in Tehran. The public conversation, the official rhetoric around their nuclear program, it began to shift. And it shifted in a direction that made the rest of the world very, very nervous.
This quote from Iran's intelligence minister is just so telling. A cornered cat may behave differently. That's not just a threat, you see. It's a justification. It was Iranian officials basically laying out their argument in advance. If you squeeze us too hard, our peaceful doctrine might just have to change. And if it does, that's on you, not us.
And a few things were really driving this change. There was the escalating shadow war with Israel, the fact that its key regional ally, Hezbollah, seemed to be getting weaker, and this growing perception in Iran that the U.S. was complicit in attacks on its soil. All of this started to create a new narrative. Maybe, just maybe, a nuclear weapon is the only real way to guarantee your own survival, the ultimate deterrent. But we have to remember, this whole dispute was never just about centrifuges and enriched uranium. For the United States, any potential new deal had to be way, way broader. It had to address the full scope of what it called Iran's malign activities in the region. I mean, just look at this list of U.S. demands. It wasn't just about the nuclear stuff. It was stop all uranium enrichment, end your ballistic missile program, pull all your forces out of Syria, cut off all your regional allies. This was a demand for a fundamental change in Iran's entire foreign and military policy. For Tehran, this was a complete non-starter. And look, this conflict has such a long and tangled history. It's been dissected for years by legal scholars, academics, and foreign policy experts, which just goes to show you how deep these disagreements really are. We're talking about fundamental clashes over international law, national rights, and who's obligated to do what. And while those heavy sanctions were crippling Iran's official economy, the U.S. alleged that Tehran was using ancient informal systems to keep funding its allies. They pointed to the Hawala network. You can think of it as a money transfer system based completely on trust. No banks, no wire transfers, no paper trail. It was supposedly a key way Iran was moving money completely off the grid, bypassing the entire international banking system. So, by the middle of 2025, the situation was really hitting a boiling point.
All the diplomatic channels seemed exhausted. And then, Iran made one final decisive move that basically pushed the whole crisis right over the edge. This was the move. This was what set off alarm bells everywhere. By kicking out the UN's nuclear inspectors, Iran essentially just dropped a black curtain over its entire program. From that moment on, nobody on the outside could truly verify what was happening inside those facilities.
And the warnings from the IAEA, the nuclear watchdog, became incredibly dire. They said they couldn't track Iran's uranium stockpile anymore. They used this phrase that they had lost continuity of knowledge. Now, that might sound like dry bureaucratic language, but it's not. It's the technical way of saying we are flying completely blind, and we are in the middle of a full-blown crisis.
And this is really why it matters so much. That information vacuum was incredibly dangerous. It left the United States and its allies having to guess. Were they making a dash for a bomb? No one could say for sure. And when you're operating in that kind of blindness, the risk of someone deciding to launch a preemptive strike grows exponentially. So the strikes happened, but what did they actually accomplish? The immediate aftermath was just a fog of conflicting reports, dire warnings, and a profound uncertainty about what the future would hold. You had the official White House claim, total obliteration, setting Iran's program back by years. But then, a conflicting assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency gets leaked, and it tells a very different story. The sites were significantly damaged but not destroyed. The delay might only be a few months. So who was right? It was almost impossible to know. And here is the great, terrifying paradox of this whole thing. Almost immediately, experts started warning that the strikes, the very action meant to prevent a nuclear Iran, might actually have the exact opposite effect. They argued that by proving how vulnerable Iran's conventional defenses were, the attack would only reinforce the belief in Tehran that nuclear weapons are the only ultimate guarantee of their security. Which leaves us with this final, deeply unsettling question. Did Operation Midnight Hammer prevent a nuclear Iran, or has it actually guaranteed one? Was this the end of a crisis, or the beginning of an even more dangerous one? Did it eliminate a threat, or did it just lock it in for good? The answer to that question will likely shape the security of the entire world for years to come.